Ian Wafula is a journalist in Nairobi, and he joins me now via Skype for an update. Thank you very much, Ian, for joining us. Perhaps let's start with a broader response in terms of the COVID-19 virus from government.
Okay, thank you very much for that. And of course, the tricky bit for governments, even just not in Kenya, but across Africa, is how do you try and contain the coronavirus at the same time ensure that your economy is still moving? And this is sort of the approach that the Kenyan government is kind of taking. Just last week, we saw the Ministry of Health here announcing that, you can, if you own a restaurant, you can reopen it just with certain measures. And of course, you can see there's kind of a slow move into going back to normal, but still the restrictions given by government still exist, including, what you've just talked about, the curfew between 7 p.m. to 5 a.m. There's also what we call the cessation of some counties. Basically, about 5 counties in Kenya which have been hard hit by coronavirus. The government has banned movement in and out of these counties. Specifically, we have the 2 main cities, that is Nairobi and Mombasa. You cannot go in and out of these counties because they've kind of been hard hit. And this is one of the main measures the government is taking in terms of trying to control the coronavirus. And of course, right now, due to some concerns coming from Kenyans and within East Africa, is how our neighboring country, Tanzania, is managing their process. We've seen they've taken less strict measures. For instance, churches are still open, public places, most of them still remain open. And we have seen kind of the numbers, even though they read them after sort of a number of days, we've seen that every time they have an announcement, their numbers kind of spike. And so neighboring countries have actually been very concerned about how Tanzania is controlling coronavirus. In fact, Zambia actually closed their borders yesterday to Tanzania. So this is just conversations that are currently happening in Kenya, even as sort of people try to work with what we now refer as the new normal.
The new normal, so a threat being posed by your neighbors there. Curious to find out how Kenyans have adjusted to the measures that have been put by the government, especially in terms of these curfews.
Okay, you'd find that, as early as 5:30 p.m., people are already going home. In fact, there was an announcement that was put out by government. If you're an employer, just make sure that your employees have left the office by 4 p.m. This enables them to get home by 7 p.m. to avoid, falling into the curfew hours, because there are penalties that come with that. And I must say that Kenyans are actually responding quite well when it comes to the measures that have been put in place. Most people are staying at home, and you can tell this by the fact that, the streets of Nairobi, which ordinarily on a given day would be very busy, there's no traffic, there's no, human traffic as well. So people are trying to adhere to, the government measures. Of major concern, however, is the people within the slums. For instance, Kibera, which is one of Africa's biggest slums. As you might know, the nature of a slum is that houses are congested and there's a huge population there. And most of these people are actually casual workers and laborers, so they do depend on day-to-day income. So you find that a number of Kenyans have actually come together, and they're trying to support those in the slums and those who are worst affected, especially economically, during this time. So, there's also kind of a positive side to coronavirus, where it kind of is bringing people together, even as everyone is trying to beat the pandemic and wait to see how far and how long this will go for.
Some positive aspects coming out of this, but the country is battling misinformation. Tell us more on that.
Yes, that's true. And misinformation is just not unique to Kenya alone. I'll tell you of a very interesting myth that was popular in East Africa. So that's Uganda, Kenya, and Tanzania. We saw people have been taking, rumor had it that if you take strong black tea, and especially early in the morning, then somehow, weirdly, it prevents you from catching coronavirus. And as we know, that is not true. But also on a larger scale, there have been videos circulating online claiming that if you have a mixture of ginger, lemon, and garlic and put them in one concoction, and you take it, it prevents you or cures you from catching corona. Well, the truth is, being a fact checker, we've spoken to nutritionists. They say that what that does, it just improves your your nutrition, but it does not necessarily, it's not a cure or it's not a preventive measure against corona. And do people can rely on, Ministry of Health within their respective countries. They can also rely on the World Health Organization. In fact, if you type World Health Organization Mythbuster, you'll find that they've listed a number of myths that have been circulating online, and people are taking them as gospel truth, but they have sort of, been able to kind of debunk them to avoid, many more people believing them.
Very quickly for us, Ian, coronavirus was met by an outbreak of locusts in certain parts of the country. Just how much attention and resources is being pumped into that?
I must say that immediately, I think it was on the 13th of March when Kenya announced its first case of coronavirus. As you can imagine, because this is something new to not only governments, but even the people. So most of the energy and focus has shifted more to coronavirus. And I must say that conversations came up about locusts as well. And remember, this is the first time that the locust outbreak is hitting Kenya and East Africa hardest for the first time in over 70 years. So this is also something else that is of concern to governments here and also the people, and more specifically the farmers in areas where locusts have invaded, and this has sort of affected that. So I know, from what I've seen is that operations in handling this have sort of slowed down because everyone is trying to contain coronavirus. Remember, one of the key elements is to stay home and avoid traveling. So, that sort of kind of brings impacts, rather the focus that had been put there to address the local situation. It's not as bad as it was before, and I'm glad that this kind of situation was addressed, way before Corona. Otherwise, we would have been looking at a huge problem when it comes to food insecurity. But then we have reports that locusts are still there, but not in that, in their numbers as it were before.
We really appreciate you coming on the show and talking to us. Ian Wafula is a journalist in Kenya, Nairobi.